The Jason Rigdon Show is recorded in Seattle, Washington in front of a live studio audience of indifferent but cute cats. You can support this podcast by giving us a rating and review on iTunes, sharing this episode on social media, or just by telling a friend about the show. You can also support the show financially on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/Jason Rigdon.
Well, I go by Kreau, pronounced just like the flying bird. I guess people can refer to me as a street artist or stencil artist or whatever artist. And I primarily work with spray paint and spray acrylic. And in the context of this, I guess lately, why we're probably talking is because my work lately has been kind of very involved with both COVID and a lot of the political unrest going on. So has largely been taking shape on the plywood storefronts and surfaces around Seattle lately. So it's been kind of a shift this year, seeing a lot more kind of bigger scale mural work going up around Seattle.
Yeah, people don't know we're recording this November 2020, and we're here in Seattle. We're both in Seattle, or Seattle area. And, a lot of our businesses since the beginning of COVID have been boarded up with plywood, and there was kind of a movement to kind of put art on those things. So it wasn't just plywood. How did that come about for you of contributing to that artwork?
So the plywood first kind of started going up. I paint largely around Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle. And I've, in the early days of the lockdown, a lot of us, I think, especially around Capitol Hill, were taking that very, very seriously. So, for the early days, I don't think I left my apartment for a very long time. And I think when I first did, it was a pretty big shock to kind of go down the streets of what was a pretty, well-functioning kind of close community. I know a close community in a city like Seattle may be different for a lot of other folks, but as a lot of the shops we're used to seeing were suddenly just these kind of barren walls. And it was a shock because, Seattle, for better or worse, there's a lot of opinions out there. Seattle is a city that is changing and is undergoing a lot of change. And, to suddenly kind of see it just stop is, it impacts you in a way that I think was surprising. It's weird to already kind of feel at this point to look back and be like, well, back in those days, but, in April, we're already kind of saying back in those days, it was a half a year ago, we were still hit with a lot of mixed emotions and not knowing where we were going to be going, financially, physically, mentally, whatever Italy you want. And so we had all these kind of blank walls. A lot of them were untouched. And at the same time, because of that uncertainty, there was a little bit of a Wild West mentality. And at least in Capitol Hill, a lot of artists hadn't really hit those walls just yet. And I thought, I have stencils. I have some things already built up. I wonder if anyone would mind if I just started painting on these walls. I mean, they're presumably temporary anyway. And a lot of the work I do, is just very meant to be kind of a kind of pictorial riddle, if you will. So just trying to give some people something to look at that shows that there's still people here, there's still people in this community, and there's still something going on. So that was like very early in April. And I just went out and I started painting on a wall. And like later that afternoon, I started seeing other artists doing the same thing. And I found out that there was some organization to that effort, that there were some groups that had worked with some of the store owners. There were some Facebook groups or something like that. I wasn't keened into that. I wasn't involved in that, but I just wanted to paint. And so I did so. And I just wanted to kind of be these kind of positive messages that, still have a little bit of an edge to them, that are a little bit, not just sunshine and stars and like, hey, everything's going to be great, but just like, hey, we're still here. And, we always will be, because it's Seattle, damn it. Can I do light cursing?
Oh yeah, no, you could say whatever you want, pretty much.
Okay. See, the case in point, Seattle, edgy. So that's how it started. And, now here we are in November, and I think I've done something like 24 murals since. Not all of them COVID, clearly, because in June, the temperature changed as well, into more social matters.
Yeah. So during this whole time, how did this pandemic affect your work? Aside from giving you the opportunity to present it to more people in this way, but did it affect your subject matters?
Yeah, in a way, I guess. It affected maybe not so much the subject matter, but the scale. Because a lot of the work I had been doing previously, I had been doing some work out on walls, and more kind of street art. I call them projects rather than murals. But they tended to be kind of very small in kind of wide areas, like doing wheat paste ups or doing stickers, the occasional piece that was sprayed but put up in another way. How I even got into stenciling was trying to do things like on actual plywood boards that I would then put up in places. So like small, like 2x2 plywood boards. So it's very fitting that now plywood's being put up everywhere. So the first piece I did back in April, what I had been doing in the past few years was kind of taking that street art mentality, but bringing it into kind of a hybrid of fine art meets street art. So I paint largely on Bristol board. And those, because I do stencils, are a fixed size. So they are 18 inches by 24 inches. So the first piece I did in early April, because I already had the stencils cut, was kind of a triptych of 3 designs. And then I cut out some lettering to say something along the lines of, take care of Seattle, with 3 of my existing designs I thought fit kind of the bill of what we were going through. But then when I realized that this is something that a lot of artists are getting behind, and something that I could essentially do in broad daylight, and not only did not get in trouble from, but that the police would basically drive by and, pay no mind, or that people would walk by and offer me things. Like people were offering me food and beverages and wanted to take pictures of me because it was this thing that people needed to see. Like it was like this conversation point that people wanted. I started to actually cater the designs more to the walls themselves, and made bigger designs to accommodate full-sized walls. Because most plywood is closer to 84 inches tall. So I was actually printing out full sheets of or full length paper stencils and cutting those and making grander scale. So I did develop unique designs for walls and unique messages for walls, and would go out and paint them to fit. So it was kind of a combination of, I was developing a different subject matter a little bit that was accommodating what we were going through, but also just taking a new scale of the art itself.
As an artist, what drew you to stencils?
Yeah, that's also kind of you always try to find your ism or your thing, right? And the full story to that is far beyond the scope, I think, of this interview. It's a long story. But I've dabbled in so many media, and the shorter version of it is I've tried my hand at trying to just paint what I see, and I don't like it. I've tried to draw what I see, and I don't like it. I think early on I was attracted to the idea that art is something that belongs to the people, and street art affords the opportunity where it becomes a conversation piece. You get rid of the idea of ownership, that it's something for all to enjoy, and you immediately get to express yourself to an audience. The hiccup I had was that there are people out there that I just absolutely marvel over, who can put a rattle can in their hand and spray something absolutely beautiful. And I give so much respect to these people who, I mean, it's a craft, and some of them have been honing it since they were 10 years old, and they put in work for it. A lot of people don't realize just how much work that they put in, starting with what a lot of people think is eyesores. It's tagging and doing stuff like that. It's a real craft. I don't have that control, and I've wanted it. I tried to develop it, but I found that I was able to kind of take that desire and modify it to some of the skills I do have, which was a little bit more in the narrative of the design I wanted to tell, and be able to take that, spend my own time developing an idea and a concept and a design, and then work on it at my own pace somewhere, where there aren't eyes, in a studio or in my apartment, and then be able to take something out and act quickly, because I wouldn't be able to work quickly and get the product I wanted to out in public where street art is meant to happen. So the stenciling was basically kind of a needed to happen in evolution, in order for me to realize the vision I had, with the capabilities I unfortunately had as well. So it's a thing I've been developing for over about 10 years. So yeah, it's something I have also put in the time for, but now I don't see it so much as an obstacle. It's something that I've come to embrace.
You touched on it a little bit there, but I'm kind of interested in what drew you to kind of that world of street art.
Sure. That whole thing too probably gets to be a little bit beyond the scope of this whole interview. But again, without sounding like too much on a soapbox, even the word art sometimes has like an elite sound to it. And, I feel it is a language in and of itself. It's a universal language that we all deserve and all want, to be frank. And art in and of itself has become commodified, and it has become a currency rather than a language. And I feel that is unfortunate. And I don't want to rag on people when that is their craft or their profession. That's fine. We all have professions. There are people who make it their profession. My profession is a creative field. So I'm by no means gonna put people down for even commodifying it. That'd be a hypocrite of me. But at the same time, I think there are thresholds that get crossed, and when it becomes this world where it becomes inaccessible to people, I get really upset that there are people, I think, who art is inaccessible to them. And I think there needs to be people who are willing to give that world to everyone else. And you look at cities around the world, and people want to interact with it. Like I don't necessarily love when you see like what Instagram has done to street art, but it shows the power of it. It shows that people want to be part of it. It shows that people want to share it. It shows that people want to interact with it. You look at the power of like what happened, with the 5 Point artists, that, there's literally changing the laws of ownership, where, landlords can't just tear down people's art when it's for the world. So this idea of like turning a city or neighborhoods or the streets or buildings into canvases for people, it becomes the people's art. And not only just for aesthetics, but for things like revolution, for things like voices. I mean, this is going to get a little tangential, but if you remember, like back in the Iran-Contra sort of stuff, like a fax machine was a tool of revolution. So sometimes, like little things that don't seem that huge are still tools of communication, and communication is invaluable. So to me, like, street art has always been this resonance, has had resonance for me as like, why complicate it? Why try to sell things? Why try to commodify it? Why try to make this currency out of it when it could just be for everyone? And you look at that right now, and you look at every boarded up shop, which I feel very horrible, for all these shops. But what happened was this wave of a community came out and filled those spaces up. And that's what the news was talking about. That's what got people out taking photographs. People were smiling, people were talking, people were sharing again. People were reaching out to each other to get more, because art had the power to heal. And that sounds so cliche and a little bit Hallmark, but it's the truth. From all of this, a bittersweet opportunity came out where it really truly felt like a big part of the artist community in Seattle has been thinning out and getting forced out. And with this really unfortunate disaster going on, we saw that that's not entirely true. It's been there. It's just been, kind of under a sheet for a bit, and now it's back out in the streets.
You talked about the effect that Instagram has had on street art. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, again, I have a lot of opinions on that. Instagram is fine. Social media is fine. And I never want to bemoan people for their habits or needs. And again, I can't throw bricks in a glass house. I'm on Instagram, and I always love it when people interact with me on there. But you talk about, has things changed, or has COVID influenced my art or whatever? I think Instagram has influenced street art horribly. You see so much out there that is trying to get the likes and the follows. Even people who don't just sign their name on murals, they sign with their the logo of the Instagram. And again, it's like I'm not, dumping on these people. They're trying to make a living too. But it changes the game, right? And that is still a valid interaction. But there's also a little bit of a gentrifying effect of our medium when it starts to become dependent on another medium, right? When it can't just exist to exist, when it has to exist to please another, that's always a bit of a bummer for me. But it happens, and it's a changing world, and like we have to adapt. So I get it, but I also sometimes get a little bit like, come on, just exist. So, but I get it. That's where I exist in that world too. So I get it. I'm not, again, not throwing too many stones there, but sometimes I just want people to express themselves truly for what they want to express, and not express themselves for what they want people to like, you know.
Well, it seems like from what you're saying is that you're quite concerned oftentimes with maybe how money or some other kind of form of that influences people's art, and you want yours to be kind of maybe free from that in some way.
Yeah, and I'm also a realist. I get that's not necessarily going to happen. Like, you know, money creates art. It always has and always will. It's when we're dependent on it that is a huge bummer. And you know, if services or grants out there, you know, would better fund the arts, then you know, maybe some of these folks would be less dependent on it. But we're not there. You know, just like I work full time and I use those funds to help fund my art. You know, I'm very fortunate in that way. Not everyone is that fortunate. A lot of people need to use their art to fund their art. So again, that's why I can't rag on people. But you know, should street art be for sale? That's the question that only I have only one opinion, and then others people have other opinions too. You know, should street art get commissioned? That's another question. You know,
Do you think that it should be sold or be commissioned?
do I think so?
Yeah.
Well, you know, everything has context, right?
I mean, for you personally, maybe.
Right now, like in the past year, like I said, I did like 22, 24 murals. None of it has been commissioned. In fact, none of it's been agreed to be done. It's all been kind of guerrilla. Some of the places I have painted have asked me to do some additional work for them, and have offered to pay me, and I've always turned them down. Because to me, like it shouldn't be, like it's something that I'm doing for me, and it's something I'm doing for the community. And also it's like, well, you've been shut down for 4 months. Like you can't even pay your employees right now. You don't need to pay some jackass artist who painted on your store without asking you, you know? So there's that. But again, I also recognize that I'm in a position where I can say that. Like I'm privileged enough to be able to turn someone down. So, you know, if there's some 20-year-old kid who's been living on the street and someone says, "Hey, I want to give you some bucks to paint this," do I have the right to say no? Like, no, that's not my place to say that. So there's always context, right? There's broader questions about capitalism and art that we're not going to solve today in our little discussion. So, you know, it's tricky, but you know, it's also kind of weird that, like, you know, businesses can be punished for leaving graffiti up on their walls, you know, and they're charged every day for leaving it up, which is like another problem, you know. So money in art is weird. It goes both ways. Yeah, I don't think there should be like a no, you shouldn't get paid to do this. It's my choice that I choose not to. And I also sell my work. You know, I sell my paintings I do on Bristol board. So like, you know, I don't like to. You know, to me, like an ideal world would be like, I wish I could get supported to paint. You know, like if that makes sense. Like I wish there was like a fund where it's like, oh yeah, you know, your supplies are getting paid for. Now go realize your vision, rather than saying, oh, this thing you made is worth this much, you know. But that's some different system thinking, which we're not there yet.
So you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Different forms of art for a while, and don't seem like you're motivated by the money. So what does motivate you to keep on making this art?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, no, that's really complicated, right? Again, I think you ask 500 people, you get 500 different answers, right? I've often asked myself that, and I don't have a good answer. And some people think when I do try to give an answer that I'm being overly poetic or trying to sound deeper than I am, and that's not true. And it sounds cliche, but the best answer I can give is like I just do what I need to do. It needs to be done. And I think there are ideas and emotions and feelings that uh, you just can't verbally express. And we're all complex people. That's not a unique feeling by any means, but it feels very often like that we don't have the right words. And so, again, a lot of the designs I do are, I kind of use the word riddle, because I feel like a lot of the times the way I feel is a bit of a riddle. And so I often say it's like, well, is it meant to be serious or is it meant to be silly? And the answer is kind of like, yeah. And I think that's a lot of kind of who I am as a person. You don't really know if it's serious or silly. You don't know if it's a joke. You don't know if it's more of a complex idea. And so it's just something I need to do. I used to work at this company. I was having a bad day one day, and my boss, who was having a hard time with me just being a pain in the ass, said, hey, why don't you just take off early and just like go paint or something, like, if that will make you happy. And I said, you think that makes me happy? I'm not happy when I'm painting. It could be quite horrible, like it's not good. I just do it because, it needs to be done, which got into a big, long discussion with him. He's also a bit of an artist, and he's like, oh, then why the hell do you do it? So yeah, it's one of those things that it just, especially like right now during this time, no one's happy to protest, no one's happy to be the empathetic person, or the shoulder that people can come to and cry on. No one's happy to be, I guess, the mediator in a disruption, a disagreement. And I'm not saying I'm all of these things, but I guess I can empathize with these feelings. And I feel like if I can visually express that, then someone can relate. And I guess that means something to me in one way or another. So that's why I do it.
And do you have any thoughts about, how you would like people to kind of perceive your art? You're getting like a lot of eyeballs being on the street, people passing by. Do you have any thoughts about how you'd like that to be consumed or understood?
Yeah, I just like when people think. I've been opening up my studio to Art Walk for the past year or the year before COVID. And it's been an incredible experience. I love, having the community to come in and talk about art, and just being very open. But I found I struggle with just straight up compliments. That's not what I'm seeking. I'm not looking for just the like. And I actually was having better conversations with people who were critical of the work, and I don't mean just straight up like, hey, this is a bunch of garbage.
Yeah.
But people who want to have a discussion, I always enjoyed that, because I love thinking, and I love people who give thought. And so I want these to be kind of thought provoking, for better or worse. And when people open up a conversation and tell me like, oh, this means this to me, or this means that to me, I absolutely get floored by that. Or they tell me a story, like, oh, this reminds me of this. Like I was painting for some of the protests. I had a design that was a young man with an American face or American flag face mask, and it said, "You have the right to remain heard." I had so many people come up to me and tell me that it looked like a relative of theirs. And then that would open up these conversations, which was funny because like the face was obscured, but people saw something in it, you know. And so it was great because it just kind of created this storytelling point in people's lives. And while I'd be cutting the stencil on the sidewalk, people would be talking to me, and I really loved that way more than like, oh, this is amazing work. You know, I like that. Of course, we all like to hear that, but like it didn't mean as much as like hearing something. Oh, this is incredible, or this is, you know, this is my niece, or this is my uncle, you know. So I like that. But I love when people share it in a meaningful way too along that line. And this is where prepare for the hypocrisy. You know, Instagram has kind of helped in that way, because like I have been getting people who share a photo of them interacting with the piece, the pieces I've put up, but in interesting, unique ways. So again, like with the protest pieces, you know, I had groups send me images of some of the murals I put up during the protest, and then tell me about things that were happening during the protest with them. Or I recently had a piece that's still up on Pine, and a mother sent me a picture of her daughter looking up at it. You know, the daughter looks like she's maybe 5 or 6. And so like I get tagged because my name is on it. And so I see how some of the work is interacting on people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And so that's not being complimented or, you know, being told like, oh, this is so amazing and so on and so forth. It's telling me how it's being absorbed into someone's life, and it's becoming almost like a visualization of these emotions that people are having, which is exactly why I'm creating it. It's a visualization of my emotion. And even if it's not the same emotion, that's not the point. That is the point, right? That it's an emotion for someone else. It doesn't matter what that emotion is. So I like that, you know, and that can only happen with street art, because if it's in someone's living room or bedroom, or if it's in an office place somewhere, I'm not going to get those stories. I'm not going to get those interactions with people. It has to be out in the public.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much for your artwork. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And if you want to learn more about your art, where should they go?
You can go to my website. It's Kreau.com. That's KREAU.com.
I'll make sure I have those links in the show notes. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a good opportunity. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Jason Rigdon Show. More information and links for our guests are in the show notes. For more information about this show, visit jasonrigdon.com. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, email jasonrigdon@gmail.com or leave a voicemail at 425-835-2766. Our theme music is Bush Week by Nihilor and used under the Creative Commons Attribution License. This episode is copyrighted by Jason Rigdon in 2020 and is freely available under the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. Thanks for listening and have a great day.